Hello there. Welcome to the second year of the Sycamore Street Studios Thom Peeler's tier list of movies I watched in the last 365 days. It's been a minute since I last was able to post anything, really, and I had some, let's just say it, I had big goals this year, but I could have done better. And my goal next year is potentially to do better. But if you watched the God of War Mise en Game episode, or if you watched any of the great stuff that Josh and I produced over a cast of the past, thank you. My filmmaking flame still has not fully been rekindled yet after the last 2 years. Borderline almost snuffed me out. I'm like a Charmander in the rain, not doing too well. But my love of movie films still alive and kicking, and I want to talk about 40-ish pieces of film that I saw in the last year. Let's get going. We are following letterboxed chronological release date rules, which means technically some of these came out in 2020, but screw it. If they had a general release between January 1st and December 31st, 2021, it counts. And the first movie on that list is Worth. Worth is a based on a true story biopic released on Netflix around the 20th anniversary of September 11th, and it deals with the fallout of the September 11th terrorist attacks. Worth is about the real lawyer / accountant whose job it was to run the government nonpartisan department to figure out what the families of the victims of 9/11 were entitled to in terms of compensation for the loss of their loved ones, and the high amount of human drama and controversy that stirred up, because what is the worth of a life? It's a very good adult drama. This is the kind of movie, the kind of mid-budget drama that used to pop up in theaters a couple times a year, like your Changing Lanes, like your Flight Plans. They would come out, they would make a fairly decent amount of money, but they weren't expensive to begin with, and you would get, this is where certain directors would earn their medal, or certain actors would find side projects to do on their downtime. But nowadays it's either indie films or AAA blockbusters, and there's no more in between. So this is a nice in-between movie to see get released. Is it that great? It's fine. It's not the cream of the crop, but it's an interesting drama that I'm gonna start off the B tier with. So Worth, for right now, you're top of the B tier. Okay, up next, we have Coda, a big crowd-pleasing favorite from this year. Coda being an abbreviation of Children of Deaf Adults. This is currently available on Apple TV Plus, and it is a story of a young girl who is the only hearing member of a family of deaf individuals. And this is such a kind of heartwarming and expectation-defying movie, just in that, there's a lot of things you expect out of stuff like this, and it really defies all those expectations. It doesn't approach them the way you would. It's very thoughtful. It's very considerate to all the characters and all of their plights. The lead character, played by Emilia Jones, in one hell of a breakthrough debut performance, her heart is tied to her family and how she's literally their translator, their crutch to the real world. And her family, they're loving, they're eccentric, they're kind, and they're united, but they're afraid of what their life could be like without Emilia, who's about to graduate high school and who wants to go to college. And that generates some authentic conflict, everything in this movie feels very authentic. The characters feel very lived in, and they're just all delightful. I enjoyed this a lot. I think there's a lot of good going for it, and I know it's earning a lot of praise that it deserves, especially for representation of deaf family members, or I should say, for deaf individuals in film. You have Academy Award winner Marlee Matlin rounding out this cast as the mother of the family, and a lot of great breakthrough performances from some actors who I hope get to make impact later down the line. So this is going to be our first A-tier film for Coda. Absolutely worth seeing. Moving on to The Sparks Brothers, the only documentary I'm ashamed to say I saw this year. I did a really bad job on catching up on documentaries, but this is an Edgar Wright directed documentary about his favorite band, and as the film's tagline or marketing kind of describes it, it's allegedly your favorite band's favorite band. This is a passion project with a capital P, Edgar Wright cashing in all of his blank checks from his big projects to talk about this band who is both super successful and borderline unknown. It's two brothers who have been creating music since the 60s, and they have somehow managed to, without going super mainstream, they have embodied glam rock, new wave, kind of club music in the 2000s, like electro pop, all this kind of stuff. And they've crossed paths with so many iconic musicians along the way. The Pet Shop Boys, Franz Ferdinand, one of the brothers dated the lead singer of the Go-Go's, and their music is incredibly intriguing. Like, I have gotten into a lot of their music because of this documentary, and there's a lot of good jams in their discography. Like, they're legitimately good. Learning their story is, you just start rooting for them the longer it goes, and it's a really damn well-made documentary. Gotta say, worth seeing. It's currently on Netflix. The Sparks Brothers, absolutely give them a look and a listen. Moving on to Passing. This is a historical drama adapted from a 1929 novel. This is the directorial debut of actress Rebecca Hall, who you might kind of know in a mainstream capacity from being in Iron Man 3, but she's been a long-time working actress, and it stars Tessa Thompson and Ruth Negga. Tessa Thompson encounters a childhood friend, played by Ruth, who is passing in the late 1920s as a white woman because she is a bit light-skinned. And, Tessa is in direct kind of personal conflict with this because she, being a darker-skinned black woman, has had to struggle to kind of earn everything that she has earned. She has a quite successful life in 1920s New York as the wife of a black doctor. She's got a family and everything, but she's kind of torn internally because her friend has used her fairer complexion to rise a little bit higher. She's the wife of a wealthy, outwardly racist man who kind of makes these like very ugly nicknames about his wife's borderline African American appearance. And as their kind of rediscovered friendship grows, as I said, they were childhood friends, Tessa kind of becomes resentful at the way that Ruth is integrating herself into her life and her community when she, like, there's notions of kind of like, betrayal, traitorism, things like that. But it's a very compelling and interesting film about identity, about desire, and like what one wants out of life, especially out of a social life at a time and in a community when the options were limited and the kind of the opposition from the larger culture was strong. These are both really great lead performances. Ruth is in my short list of best supporting actresses of the year. She's incredible in this. And this is a hell of a directorial debut from Rebecca Hall. I would love to see where her filmography is going to go from here. So Passing, throwing you right up there into the A tier. Up next is Judas and the Black Messiah, which, despite the fact that it was a big player at last year's Academy Awards for the best films of 2020, this was wide released in 2021. It was only an Oscar player last year because of the extended deadlines that the Oscars put in place for, films affected by the initial wave of the pandemic. But this would have been a big Oscar contender no matter what time period it was released in, because this is a phenomenal historical drama, a very good two-hander, deuteragonist story. You have the compelling life of Black Panther leader Fred Hampton, played by Daniel Kaluuya, in a role that he won an Oscar for last year. And then you have Bill O'Neill, played by Lakeith Stanfield. He's a small-time thief who gets caught up in the FBI plot to assassinate Fred Hampton, and he gets used as a pawn. And it's a story that's been well told. I mean, literally the title in there is Judas Iscariot, who betrayed Jesus for the Pharisees. Here it's Bill. The closer he gets to Fred, the more he kind of becomes attached to Fred's philosophy and just Fred as a man. But he knows that he has to kill this person that he's getting connected to, or else his life is over. So it's a really, really compelling drama with a lot of good historical relevancy, a lot of good supporting performances, and this will be the first entry into the S tier of the year. This is just top cream of the crop filmmaking, and I gotta recognize it. All right, from one red film poster to another red film poster, we have Cherry. and this will be one of our first just garbage tier movies of the year, and it's really heartbreaking. So a little bit of a personal story about this movie. This movie is based off of the true story of a young man who served time in the military and came back and was so destitute and just kind of facing demons that he turned to robbing banks to get by. And I remember BuzzFeed covered this story in 2014, and I read it and I was like, damn, that would make a really good movie. And back when I was writing spec scripts like crazy, I started kind of developing an idea for this, and it was just like, this seems really compelling. I have family and friends who served in the military. I bet I could like get some perspective to help develop like, you know, my script's version of this character. I kind of let it go, and then I was surprised when the Russo brothers announced that like this was their first post-Avengers Endgame project and that they got Tom Holland to play the main character. And the final thing, I think personally it's a mess. And the biggest issue is that it's not a direct adaptation of this true story. It turns out that when said individual, I'm blanking on his name, but the soldier, when he was imprisoned after finally getting caught, he wrote basically a novel biopic, you know, like he told his story but through a fictional character and stuff. And that's what they're adapting here. They're adapting the novel of this guy's true story, and I think it's a layer too far, because Cherry it's too many things at once. It's, you know, it's a psychological drama about PTSD, and it's also like this dark crime saga about a guy embedded with drug dealers and da-da-da-da. It does too many things, and it doesn't do enough of them well. And it's the Russos, unfortunately, I gotta say, it feels like they're really trying to show off beyond their means. It's like, we don't just want to be known as Marvel guys. We can go hard into, you know, dark crime territory, kind of a la your Michael Manns, your Brian De Palmas, your Martin Scorsese's. You know, we can do that too. And it's not that they can't, but their energy is just too unfocused, and Cherry suffers as a result. It also doesn't help that Tom Holland is cast way too young. Like, we follow the character that he plays over about like 25 years, maybe more of his life, and he still has Tom's boyishness. And Clara Bravo, who plays his love interest, she looks even younger than Holland. And by the time she's supposed to be portraying his, you know, late 30s wife at the end of the movie, she looks like a high school junior. So, yeah, not great casting, not great execution of the story. This is a bad movie. Bad movie. Could have been it's a bad movie, and it's even worse because, man, what it could have been. What it could have been, in my opinion. Moving on to a redo of a bad movie, we have They Said It Could Never Happen, and yet here it is. Hang on, Photoshop's taking a while to even show it. It's Zack Snyder's Justice League. Yes, if at first you don't succeed, try again with a borderline 5-hour movie that fans rabidly demanded over multiple years. So, I was no fan of the first Justice League back in 2017. I thought it was a mess of a movie, and, you know, history has come to show that it was a literal mess of a movie. Like, you'd be surprised that when you have two directors and multiple studio heads trying to, you know, produce a story, it's a garbled mess. But here, you know, the story goes that fans demanded it. Warner Brothers went to Zack, and they were like, if we give you a little bit extra money, not a little bit, a lot of it, but if we give you extra money, could you finish this for HBO Max? And he did. And, you know, it's better. It is a more competent and fulfilling story than 2017's Justice League was, but also, it's, you know, it's like 4.5 hours long. It's a slog to get through. And I'm not the kind of person who watches stuff in pieces. Movies are movies. They're not miniseries. They're not episodic television. So sitting through this, I was just like, God damn. And, you know, in the end, it's like, okay, good job. You told a better story. The characters are all way more compelling. You know, Cyborg arguably becomes the most interesting character instead of just the character who's there. The action sequences are a lot more well-developed, although it is Zack's style of super slow-mo, you know, speed ramps and things like that. Wonder Woman's new score is one of the most hilariously bad things of the year. How, you know, now before the Hans Zimmer DJ Junkie or Junkie XL, whatever, before his guitar riff Wonder Woman theme, you get these, like the Dune theme before the Dune theme, but here it just doesn't work. And the length, the pacing, and it's still a lot of the grim, dark tone of Snyder's style of this DC universe that I don't truly care for. So, oh, and God, the freaking epilogue they tack on with Jared Leto's Joker making reach-around jokes of Batman. It's so cringe. It's so just, ugh. Not for me, but it is better, so I'm gonna at least put it in the C tier, because at the end of the day, what I am happy for, at least for Zack, is that, you know, he got to finish a movie that marked a lot of professional and personal demons in his life. His daughter tragically took her life during the production of Justice League, and it, you know, it's just drained the man, and then the fallout of it probably took its toll on him. So look, he got to come back, and he got to finish the project that he started the way he wanted to, and he dedicated it to his daughter. So I'm gonna at least give it credit for that. Again, it's not for me, but there are worse movies this year. Another iconic mashup of big screen and other multimedia icons. We have Godzilla vs. Kong, the long-awaited culmination of Legendary's MonsterVerse. And goddamn, this movie is so much fun. I'm not gonna lie. This is a stupid movie, like dumb with a capital D, but it's got this sincere earnestness about its dumbness that I liked. And the big battles between the titular titans, when they actually come about, they're so fun. I think the absolute highlight is when Godzilla's stomping around Beijing and he can't find Godzilla because he doesn't realize Godzilla's in the core of the earth. You have to watch the movie to figure out what that's about. So Godzilla kind of realizes, oh, he's down there, and he opens his mouth and he blows a hole with his, you know, Godzilla super breath right down to the center of the earth, and then just starts screaming down the hole at King Kong until Kong climbs up the hole and fights him. And that's just like one of the highlights of this movie. I freaking think that this is a blast. I wish I could have seen this in theaters, because watching on TV was fun, but I just feel like I know what I was missing out on. So I'm gonna actually put this at the highest B release at the moment. This is Godzilla vs. Kong. Is good, is very, very good. Speaking of very, very good, we had a very, very good video game adaptation, Mortal Kombat 2021. So this year is the year that I fully rewatched the first Mortal Kombat 95. Josh and I did a full commentary of it over on Cast of the Past, and then watched this new one. And I think this new one is up there in terms of one of the more competent video game movies ever made. It's, obviously it's Mortal Kombat, but the tournament doesn't actually happen, so it's like, what? I mean, I have no real knowledge of the lore of Mortal Kombat. I wasn't allowed to play these games growing up, but, the millennia-long, or whatever, centuries-long rivalry between Scorpion and Sub-Zero is truly compelling. Some fantastic casting in this, from top to bottom, and just a great reimagining of this universe. Louis Tan as Cole Young, he's a really functional, fish out of water protagonist that I think works. A lot of people think he was dumb, but he's there to just be a reflection for the rest of the cast. And, his power, because Mortal Kombat's thing is that everyone has it's their inner power that has to be awakened. His makes sense, if you pay attention to his past as an MMA fighter, and then what he becomes as he's training with the other chosen ones. It works. Oh, Joe Taslim as Sub-Zero. Oh, man. Really great. I'm so happy that he signed on for more. I think he was fantastic. And then Hiroyuki Sanada as Scorpion. This guy has been a very great Japanese character actor. Kind of, my friends and I sometimes call him Great Value Ken Watanabe, but I have always loved this guy, and seen him, as Scorpion in this. He's just this terrifying, full-bodied presence, just terrific casting. I thought the action sequences in these really worked. I thought the kind of premise of what the tournament is going to be really works, and Warner Brothers is apparently satisfied with its, on-demand and theater performance enough to say, yeah, we're gonna do a sequel. So it's going in my B tier, and I'm looking forward to seeing if they can improve upon what they had. Alright, up next we have the best animated feature of 2021, The Mitchells vs. the Machines. I feel like this has been heavily slept on, despite when it initially came out, film Twitter, and all that, they had a positive reception to it, one of the best things they've ever done. And then it just never seemed to cross over into the mainstream. I've told dozens of friends about this. I've shown many a friend one of the highlights, one of the key scenes of this movie that's just hysterical. But this is a fantastic animated family comedy about, a young aspiring filmmaker. Oh, maybe that's why I like it so much. But this young girl named Katie, who's so excited to go to college and kind of get away from what she kind of sees as like a boring family life. And her dad, who can't admit that he's afraid to let her go, decides, hey, we're going to go on a family road trip across the country for one last hurrah. We're going to take Katie to college. But during their road trip, a newly introduced sentient AI from a Facebook-esque company gets launched, and it takes over all the technology in the world. And this family, who was on a kind of like a no phones, no tech road trip by the rules of their dad, are the only ones left, and they're the only ones who could save the world. And it's hysterical, it's heartwarming, and it's using the same animation technology that Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse used. So honestly, it looks gorgeous too. I remember a lot of people were kind of salty when Sony patented that technology. They were like, well, that's not fair. That doesn't let other kind of filmmakers play with it. And maybe it is an uneven playing field, but what they're continuing to let this animation style evolve into through Mitchell's, it's really something special. So I would recommend anyone see this. It's just very, very good. Second S-tier movie of the year. Gotta go right up there. All right, let's just get to it. Another S-tier movie right up here. Bo Burnham's Inside. Holy crap. A one-man show of Bo, within the meta-narrative of this, trapped inside one room for borderline a full year, and writing, directing, editing, producing, and even showing you, the guts of it all. Like several just little cutaways in this of him figuring out how to film so many of the things that he pulls off in this. The songs themselves they're all bangers. I mean, there's obviously, like, if you were to rank them, there's a most good and least good, but I have run into so many people who have seen this who say, like, so many of the different songs hit them in certain ways. Obviously, it's a commentary on how we all kind of mentally handled the pandemic, and some of us handled it in better ways than others. But when this film hits raw nerves, it hits them hard. It gets you really relating. But there's also a lot of commentary on how the current relationship we have with technology might not be best for us. How the world we live in may not be that great to people suffering from anxiety and doubt and things like that. And it does it with both, a kind of like really sharp sense of humor, but also I think a really sincere empathy for all of the topics it's confronting. Some of the biggest ones that can be argued is climate change. There's some really heavy, just wake the fuck up everybody moments in this. 20,000 years of this, 7 more to go. When he's right, he's right. So, Bo Burnham's Inside, incredible. I've been listening to this soundtrack almost all year. It's going in the S tier. What do we got next? The first movie I saw back in theaters this year, In the Heights. Yes, the adaptation of Lin-Manuel Miranda's first Tony-winning big musical blockbuster, and this was an incredible delight. When I saw it in theaters, it was really refreshing to get to go back. Like, it may have honestly colored most of my experience of this film, is how much I just enjoyed being back at the experience and seeing these big sweeping wide shots and intricately choreographed musical numbers, and this really talented cast. I mean, Jimmy Smits, getting to see him sing on screen, one of the best memories of 2021. The only thing negative I kind of have to say about it is that it's dulled a bit in my memory as time has gone by. I liked it a lot, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's very good. It's just, I think I put so much weight on this as like a theater-going experience for what I was hoping it would be, and then I saw it and it was good, and I think I valued the experience a little bit more than the film. But it's a very, very good film. It's very well made. I'm truly heartbroken that it underperformed. I think this was one of the first big victims of Warner Brothers' streaming and theatrical combo release strategy. Because, it's a mainstream musical. It's got a very limited appeal in terms of movie-going audience to begin with. So I think a lot of people who probably did check this out, they went to HBO Max first, because they were like, well, I don't know if I want to get out of my house and pay money to go to a theater, but I'll check it out on streaming. But it's good. It is very good. I'm going to move this up. This is now the highest B, but just because it's a B doesn't mean you shouldn't see. It's very good. All right, up next we have a short film called Blush, This is available on Apple TV Plus. And this is from a kind of longtime animator in the Pixar family who now works at Skydance Animation, Joseph Mateo. And this is the story of an astronaut who crash lands on a planet, and he is saved basically by a small alien being who joins him on this planetoid, and together they terraform it basically through her kind of magic. They bring, plant life, flora, fauna, all that to the planet, while also starting a family and living a life together. But then, unfortunately, tragedy befalls them, and the astronaut has to kind of learn to carry on. And, I feel like a heel saying some of the negative things I'm going to say about it, because spoilers for what Blush is. It's Joseph Mateo's very personal kind of, semi-autobiographical story of how he lost his wife to breast cancer, but learned to survive for the sake of his children. And, the movie does some really charming and even beautiful things with its animation. I mentioned it's set on a planetoid, and they do some really great kind of animated concepts with, low or no gravity, some good sight gags of that, how the whole thing is limited to one spherical setting. And it looks lovely. I think the design of the astronaut character is a little odd though. Like, everybody in this film has chibi proportions, but he has a man's face, like an adult man's head that ages very almost realistically on a chibi body. It's odd. Like, I admire this as a piece of like heartfelt, earnest, personal storytelling. I don't think the animation does it too many favors, and just because something's predictable doesn't make it bad. But the predictability of this, I don't know. I'm gonna give it a C. It is. I'll say it is better than Justice League, but just personally for me, it's a C. But it is lovely in the the kind of heartfelt story that Mateo is telling about his life and his experience. I'm in no way diminishing that. We have another short film here. We have Disney's Far From the Tree. This ran in theaters before Encanto. I don't know if this is now on Disney Plus, now that Encanto is in Disney Plus. But this is the story of generational parental trauma, basically. It's about a little baby raccoon who keeps walking outside of his dad's safety boundaries because he's a baby. He doesn't realize that the world's harsh and dangerous. And the dad kind of, conveys these lessons in some harsh terms that you see the dad feels a little, bad about. It's like, oh, I don't want to be a dick to my kid, but my kid doesn't get it. And then we do a time jump to the baby raccoon growing up and having to deal with similar things with their children. And are they gonna, carry on the way that they were raised, like their family's behavior? So I think it's really compelling in that it's a nuanced look at that. It says we are products of how our parents raise us, and our parents may damage us in certain ways, but there can be love behind mistakes, and it comes down to how family communication reckons with any of that, and if we do better in the next generation. So I thought it was really compelling, but pretty dang good. I would say this is B tier. All right, moving on to a really remarkable Pixar movie from this year, Luca. Luca, the tale of a merboy who comes out of the ocean and finds out he looks like a real boy on land, a little Italian boy. And he meets a friend who has similar powers to him, and they have awesome summer vacation adventures in a little Italian fishing village while keeping their mer-people identity, hidden from the judgmental townspeople, and while Luca's parents are trying to search for him and bring him back to the ocean. And, look, Pixar's output of, kind of thought-provoking, boundary-pushing films over its entire existence has always been incredibly good and incredibly welcome. WALL-E, Inside Out, and most recently Soul, pushing high concepts with deep thoughts, always great. But here's the thing with Luca. Luca pushes some really kind of emotionally connective, especially for certain audience members, a very true and authentic story about identity and fear over expressing who you really are, whether that's any kind of oppression that anyone can face, whether you're a member of the LGBTQ community. I would say maybe if you're also neurodivergent. It's a story about someone who knows that they're different and finds someone who is the same way, and they're just trying to live their best selves. And it's all, when I say low stakes, I don't mean that it's not important, but it's not the heavy overhanging thing of the whole film. It's a story about a young boy who finds a friend like him, and they have a fantastic summer together, competing in a triathlon where you have to ride bikes and eat spaghetti. It's so lovely in that it's Pixar chilling out a little bit. And the animation's fantastic too. There was a point where I thought Pixar was kind of getting away from experimenting with letting its animated characters actually be animated. And in here, you have Luca and Alberto and everyone else with these really exaggerated proportions. They almost look like 3D animated Rankin Bass characters, like the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer special, the way their bodies and heads are proportioned and the way they move. There's just so much to like in this movie, and there's so many people I know in my personal life who have really connected with this and, said, this is something I wish I had in my childhood. So Luca, it's gonna go up there in the A tier. Honestly, oh man, I talk about a whopper of a final scene, a real tearjerker, beautiful final scene in Luca. Very good, worth watching right away. Moving on to Steven Soderbergh's No Sudden Move, a period piece crime drama about fast talking hustlers and thieves and the kind of criminal conspiracy they get caught up in. And it stars Don Cheadle in a banger of a starring role. It's nice to see Don Cheadle out of big blockbuster territory and back into these really interesting character pieces. He's working with Benicio del Toro. He's working with Kieran Culkin. He's working with Matt Damon and John Hamm. And boom, freaking Brendan Fraser starting the Fraser-sance in this movie. Well, maybe the Fraser-sance started earlier. I don't know, but it was really delightful to see him in here. And, it's Soderbergh being slick and being quick and really, doing his thing. And it's a nice, multi-layered mystery drama, a la, Chinatown or other things like that. And it's just, it's really strong and it's really good, but I also just kind of, I can say I didn't fully vibe with it. It's good, but also not for me. There's more compelling pieces of it that I thought I would have rather they followed those threads. But again, nothing in it's bad or anything. It's just I don't know. So I'm gonna bump this into the higher end of the B tier. What I just talked about worth in those adult dramas that we don't see as much anymore? No Sudden Moves is a strong one of those. And again, it's good in that regard. Absolutely worthy of being seen. Because movies like this aren't going to get made much anymore. Alright, speaking of movies and whether or not they would ever get made. Holy crap. Annette. A dramatic musical from the Sparks Brothers, who I mentioned earlier, this little documentary that Edgar Wright made about them. I'm really glad I saw this documentary before I saw Annette, because Annette is one of the weirdest, but in a good way, one of the weirdest movies of this year. It's a musical about an actress who gets into a romantic relationship with this volatile stand-up comedian, respectively Marion Cotillard and Adam Driver, and how their relationship births a very unique child. Songs by Sparks, who make very eccentric and weird songs at times, and this movie is very eccentric and weird. Probably one of the more divisive movies of the year because of its out and proud weirdness. And there were moments during this where I would pause and turn to my fiance and be like, is this happening? Is this really happening? But some very good songs in this in terms of it being an original musical, and just it's a spectacle in what it is. I'm gonna put it up here. I'm gonna be a champion for weirdness a couple times on this list. I like all walks of filmmaking, but sometimes I gotta go to bat for movies that are so singular that they're unicorns, and Annette's a weird unicorn, but it's thank God it exists. I don't know. Tell me what you think of Annette in the comments. I'm sure there's some opinions. Here's just the dog shit worst movie of the year fucking Space Jam: A New Legacy. I know this is just probably a horse beaten into dust at this point, but man, this is a miserable movie. And I didn't even think I wanted to see it, but it's one of those movies where I didn't want to be left out of the conversation. You know, look, there was all the potential in the world here to do something, but they did nothing. This is a commercial for HBO Max, and not even a good commercial at that. I literally got a robocall from AT&T to sign me up for digital cable when I was watching this movie. So it's like they knew I was watching Space Jam. It was like, you son of a bitch, don't you dare contact me. And then AT&T goes and they sell Warner Brothers off to Discovery. But anyway, it's just nothing's good. Like, none of the storylines make any sense. You have this relationship between LeBron and his son, where LeBron doesn't get his son, and then he's got to save his son from evil Don Cheadle, who's an algorithm, but he acts the way algorithms don't really work and stuff. And then you meet the Looney Tunes, and they go to Game of Thrones world, and Foghorn Leghorn is Daenerys, and you go to frickin' Matrix world, and Granny's Trinity, and it's just like the weakest jokes. The weakest, like, the studio notes made this movie jokes, and it's just so bad. And then Bugs Bunny dies and is reborn like Jesus at the end of this movie or something. I don't know. It's so dog shit. It's not good in any capacity. There's like nothing redeeming about it. And like, here's the thing, like Space Jam, the first movie, you know, that's like a childhood kind of attachment movie for me, where it's like I have fond memories of watching that as a kid. As an adult with fresh adult eyes, and not even like filmmaker eyes, but adult eyes, the first Space Jam is kind of a little disposable, but it's entertaining. It was always entertaining, and then this just makes the first Space Jam look like pure high art by comparison. So I guess, you know, LeBron's quest to be Jordan, well, you've only padded Jordan's legacy, let me tell you, with this movie. Stay far away. Up next, this is actually the last movie I watched in 2021, Marvel's Black Widow. And, you know, it's a real shame that chronologically they decided to give Black Widow a solo film right after they killed her off in the main films. Like, why? Why? And then, you know, to give her a solo film, but like to set it between two other major films, Civil War and Infinity War, and make it this weird, like you know, I'm not the first person to say this. This is first and foremost, this is a origin story for Florence Pugh's Yelena to take up the Black Widow title into future Marvel movies. So it's not even fully centered on Scarlett Johansson's Natasha, and you know, the movie suffers for that because it's like she's been deserving of her own solo movie since she was introduced into these, you know, Marvel Cinematic Universe films, and by the time she gets it, it's a really underwhelming kind of like blah of a movie. Like, it's not that it's like there's good stuff in it, but some of the action sequences are like edited over too much where you can't actually see any of the, you know, fighting or action. Then after that there's just long periods of downtime, and I don't think I've seen a movie since Eagle Eye. Yeah, that's right. Somebody referencing Shia LaBeouf's Eagle Eye. But I don't think I've seen a movie since Eagle Eye where characters so wantonly go through horrific, you know, fatal car crashes and just get out of them like, all right, let's keep going. Like, so there's suspension of disbelief, and then there's just disbelief, and Black Widow pulls that off a lot. So whatever. I don't have any strong feelings on it. It's just, it's a Marvel movie that I watched. I probably could have watched this on TNT while scrolling on my phone and just had the same opinion of it. I'm gonna put it low C tier for right now. All right, well, we want to talk about a female-driven action movie with some actual like heart and originality. We've got Gunpowder Milkshake, which, you know, on surface it kind of looks like female John Wick. You know, look, it plays in those waters. That's not far off. But this is actually an interesting action drama about, you know, a league of assassins and the work they have to do. Karen Gillian at the front here. She is the daughter of legendary assassin played by Lena Headey, and, you know, a mystery from her mother's past comes to haunt her, and she has to kind of solve it while also finding her mother in the process. You know, great supporting cast in this, some really inventive fight scenes. There's a hospital fight scene about halfway through this that is just bangarang. I really enjoyed it. The thing is, though, this is about a 2-hour movie that only has 90 minutes worth of, you know, stuff in it. There's a lot of stuff that's really stretched and dragged out in this, and like, you know, at the end, they do this thing where Paul Giamatti's big bad, you know, they kind of get the one up on him, and it's almost like it's, you know, it's retroactive judgment. But the weekend after this debuted on Netflix greenlit a sequel, and I'm like, wow, the majority of the stuff you wasted in the last 20 minutes could have been like the setup in the beginning of your second movie. It felt like the creators of Gunpowder Milkshake were like, we have to do everything we want to do in this movie, and they did it, and then Netflix was like, oh, we'll give you a sequel. So I hope they have material to go on in the next movie. But for what it's worth, there's some really intriguing stuff in this. This is a winning idea. I just think in execution, it's a little bloated. So I'm going to put this as the highest C-tier movie of the moment in our rankings. Moving on to Jungle Cruise, Disney's most recent adaptation of one of their theme park rides. Here I thought the days of Pirates of the Caribbean and Country Bears were far behind us. But nah, like, for real, this is the first movie in a long, long time to give me, you know, 1999 Mummy vibes of just, and like, you know, the comparisons are right there on screen. They may have even directly have been, you know, pulling from that cookbook, but look, those kind of just like big goofy action movies have been a dinosaur in theaters for the longest time. So to see it come back in some form, I legit loved it. Like, this is not a perfect movie, but it's so dang fun that I almost just forgive it for any of its shortcomings. Dwayne and Emily are a hell of a leading pair. You've got Jesse Plemons hamming it up as a World War I Austrian era. I believe he's implied to be like a grandson or like the youngest son of Franz Ferdinand or something. I don't know, but it's just big, goofy, dumb fun that kind of goes long in a couple set pieces. Like, this could have been 20 minutes shorter, but I really enjoyed borderline almost every second of this movie. And it's something I want to see get made more. Like, I want more movies like this to exist. And so I gotta be part of like championing that, so that it happens. So for right now, this is now top of the B tier. Up next, we got another DC film. It is The Suicide Squad. Not a Suicide Squad, The Suicide Squad, The Suicide Squad. And, you know, this is a hell of a lot of fun. It's just also, like, I haven't thought much about this movie since I saw it. You know, like, this is competently made. It's a huge improvement over the first one. A bangarang cast where, you know, the guys that they do bring back, they either give them kind of more fitting send-offs or at least give them more to do in this movie that make them compelling characters. And all of the new characters are just real winners. Ratcatcher II is a really nice kind of like underdog, and when you find out her family history and everything, it's just really heartwarming. Sylvester Stallone is King Shark, possibly the greatest on-screen himbo of 2021. What is his name? He's got a hell of a last name. David Dastmalchian. A long-term like character actor. He was the kind of unsettled Arkham cop in Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight that Harvey Dent interrogates in an alleyway. And look how far he's come. He's had this and Dune this year. You know, a lot of bigger roles. I'm very happy. Like, you know, he's one of those like character actors who just seems to be, you know, rising as the years go by. Margot Robbie, great as always, as Harley Quinn. Probably one of the best cast superhero roles remaining to this day. One of the best cast superhero roles in years. Idris Elba, a lot of fun. But, I mean, John Cena possibly stealing this whole show. He's in my best supporting actor top list. For Peacemaker, he's getting his own HBO kind of sequel, prequel show. Continuing from the events of this movie, I hope that it does well. John Cena, an actor I used to take glee in booing. Or did I say actor? A wrestler I used to take glee in booing, especially when I got to go to live events. And here he's turned out to be one of my favorite kind of like action comedic actors of the moment. Maybe I need to give this a rewatch, probably before the Peacemaker show, but this is, in terms of blockbusters, superhero stuff, this is up there. This is up there this year, so A tier. We have, just gonna say it right now, we have my film of the year, the best movie of the year in my book, The Green Knight, from director David Lowery, starring Dev Patel and Alicia Vikander and Joel Edgerton, and just a smorgasbord of other really great actors. Freaking my boy Ralph Ineson, Axe Daddy from The Witch, shows up here as the actual Green Knight. So I didn't have any familiarity with the King Arthur tale that this is, you know, drawing from when I went to see this, but this is like what filmmaking kind of needs to be in my book. Visually spectacular, character-driven filmmaking that, you know, pulls you in and is telling you a story, but, you know, it's not telling you the story. It's not feeding you the story. It's taking you on a journey, and it's asking you to kind of like go along and be a participant while you watch, you know, the story of Dev's Knight as he goes on this honor journey. Basically, he has to fulfill the end of a bargain that he made with the titular Green Knight, and he basically encounters side quests, like almost video game side quests throughout the way, but everyone adds into the narrative and defines his character along the way. And director David Lowery takes him through so many visually compelling and beautiful and haunting places along the way, and it ends with this big, you know, visually driven sequence of, you know, like the choice that Dev has to make, and is it the right one and all that. And it's so great. It's one of like the best endings of the year. I love this movie. Love it with a capital L. And it's going to the top of the S tier. Again, my film of the year, Green Knight. Just, oh, fan-fucking-tastic. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. You know, I was having serious conversations with my fiance, you know, like after Endgame and after we kind of watched WandaVision and started and then didn't finish Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Sorry, it just kind of got boring. And then also, you know, like after watching Loki and like being into Loki, but also kind of thinking it ended kind of weakly. I don't know, like we were both kind of like, are we done with Marvel? Do you think Endgame was like a good spot to end on? Can we just like, you know, walk away from these ongoing stories? But then Shang-Chi happens, and man, this is so good. Like, this is the strongest standalone Marvel movie of the year. Just gotta say it. Simu Liu as the titular superhero. What just like a debut blockbuster performance. I cannot wait to see what I hope is a long and healthy career for him. Awkwafina shining in a really good supporting role. Tony Leung as Zhu Wenwu, the owner of the Ten Rings and Shang-Chi's father, you know, like leading one of the best supporting performances of the year for me, and one of the best Marvel villains in a long time. Like, everything about this is compelling. The action is well staged. It all looks gorgeous and beautiful. And it just rules. Like, this movie is so good. I would recommend this to anyone. Probably the best superhero movie of 2021. And don't at me when you realize what I'm putting that over, because I mean it. In terms of a standalone superhero movie that functions on its own two legs, this is it. Yeah, this is it. A very, very strong film. You're probably going to see this dominating the end of year awards. Coming up shortly, we have Jane Campion's The Power of the Dog, available right now on Netflix. This is a period drama in the dying days of, you know, kind of the Western frontier. Stars Benedict Cumberbatch, Jesse Plemons, Kristen Dunst, and Cody Smith-McPhee. And Cumberbatch leads this in one of his just nastiest, most unpleasant characters he's ever portrayed, and yet it's also one of his most fascinating. You know, he plays a kind of man's ranch hand in Montana in the late 1890s, and he's really bitter that kind of like, you know, the lifestyle that he's maintained and the world that he's lived in is just dying around him for the more modern 20th century age. His brother embodying that, and him like kind of viewing his brother as like soft and weak. And then when his brother marries Kristen Dunst and she moves on to the ranch with her son Cody Smith-McPhee, things really start taking a turn. We have Benedict trying to play his power games and like, you know, put downs on these new members of the family, but they don't fully take it, and where it goes from there is really compelling. Jane Campion, this was, maybe ashamedly of me, but this is the first film of hers I had ever seen, and it's such a banger that I'm really excited to dive into the rest of her filmography. She borderline almost directs, this movie feels like it goes between, almost 3 or 4 different kinds of movies before it arrives where it does, and when it does, you're like, oh, it couldn't have been anything else. And it's just... It's super engaging, super well made, the cinematography is beautiful, all the performances are great. I think Benedict Cumberbatch right now is easily the front runner for Best Actor, and I think he deserves it. I would not shed a tear at all if he won. Kind of a testament to his career, and there's some other great performances in that. Cody Smith-McPhee also on my Best Supporting Actor shortlist. So again, S tier. Jane Campion made one of the year's best right here with Power of the Dog. It's on Netflix. Definitely check it out. Moving on to one of the biggest blockbusters of the year, Dune, or Dunk, as it would be pronounced if you remove that little planet from the E, which then makes it the Duncan, Idaho movie. America runs on Duncan, especially in this movie. This was really, really just damn compelling. I cannot remember a movie since I was young and saw the first Lord of the Rings in theaters that just wowed me with how expansive its world seemed. And I never read the books. I know the reputation of the books and the original movie, but for me, this was my virgin Dune experience. And everything about this I thought was just so compelling. Denis Villeneuve, obviously, he's a visually stunning director. Arrival, Blade Runner 2049. I don't even like Blade Runner 2049 that much, and I think it's a gorgeous movie. But he's delivered on this before, and Dune seems to kind of be the culmination of his big spectacle-driven style, while also keeping the human elements, really engaging and intact. There's some terrific performances in here. There are some performances driven by kind of makeup and prosthetics, especially Stellan Skarsgård's Baron, that are just super compelling. And when I walked out of this, I was just I want more of this. I can't wait for the thankfully greenlit, Dune Part 2 to come out, because it's just so intriguing. I can't wait to see where this is going to go, and if maybe the success of this means the Dune universe will kind of grow in different ways on screen or something. I don't know, but Dune, an A-tier blockbuster that it's coming out very shortly on physical media, and I think it's going to get added back to HBO. So Dune, right up there. Good-ass movie. Definitely you should see it. Up next, we have what may be this year's Best Actress winner. I'm at least pulling for it. We have Spencer, starring Kristen Stewart. This is as the opening says, it is a fable from a true story. So this is almost an anti-biopic. But basically, I think I demand that all biopics now start with an opening statement as definitive as this one is, where it's if you're gonna invent shit, at least just say, hey, we invented shit. The team behind this movie take the well-known, publicly traversed life of Princess Diana, and they make what's borderline Netflix's The Crown, but more like The Shining. It's a psychological horror story about Princess Diana spending a Christmas with the royal family a few years before her marriage with Prince Charles is going to end, but it's already on the rocks. And it's about how she feels isolated and alienated. She basically feels like the only human in a house full of machines who, distrust her and put her down and trap her in cages, gilded cages, but cages all the same. And the way Stewart sells the performance and guides you through this story is just fantastic. And then the finale, pure historic fiction, but so uplifting and so just kind of hopeful. I believe it was the film website Reverse Shot. The review that I was reading of it was kind of it's not Diana running towards the destiny we know, but a destiny that she hopes she can create. And I think that's spot on. It's fantastic. Really should be seen. It's a testament to how in the years after Twilight, Kristen Stewart, along with Robert Pattinson, and I was part of this. They're terrible actors in a terrible movie. But, it's after Twilight, after they were multimillionaires from those movies, they just decided, I'm going to do projects that are unconventional and daring because I've got the money to do whatever I want. And if Robert Pattinson has already proved that, I think Kristen Stewart, with a long stretch of things like The Clouds of Sils Maria or Saint Maria, I'm sorry, I'm a trashy American who's not going to get that right. Up through this, Spencer, I want her to win Best Actress this year. I think it's a well-deserved culmination of a career that was always destined to be good, I guess, but people never gave her the proper chance, and now she just is on fire. Kristen, I'm sorry for everything I ever maybe said negatively about you. Not maybe did, because I've been a dick. You're terrific. This movie is glorious. Up next, The Lost Daughter, released by Netflix on the last day of the year. This is the debut directorially of Maggie Gyllenhaal. And, we're talking about Best Actress-worthy performances. We've got Olivia Colman, who was in my favorite movie of 2018, The Favorite, starring as an English professor on vacation at a Greek resort who gets entangled with a kind of grody, kind of implied to be criminal family at the resort, and her obsession with one of their youngest members kind of brings out all these mysteries from her past, and we start bouncing back and forth between the present with Olivia Colman's character Lita, and then the younger version of Lita, played by up-and-coming actress Jessie Buckley, and this is just such a compelling drama that takes you from moment to moment as you're trying to unravel the mystery of Lita and where this is going. And I don't think there's been a better casting of a young and old character, as we see with Lita between Olivia Colman and Jessie Buckley. Maybe back so far as Big Fish with Ewan McGregor and Albert Finney. It's just they don't look the same, but the way they embody the same character is just fantastic. And The Lost Daughter, man, this is such a ride of a movie. If this is Gyllenhaal's directorial debut, she's already set, in my opinion, to be one of the best working directors. The way that this movie approaches the concept of intimacy and how she deploys that through so many thoughtful close-ups, not just pointless close-ups, but really thoughtful, tight camera work. Everything is just so good here, so good. So Lost Daughter, another S tier in a row. If I wasn't so wowed with Kristen Stewart, I would say Coleman's my kind of champion for Best Actress, but I very much kind of of the mind of if you win one, you got to give someone else a chance. But this might be the best work of Olivia Colman's career, for real here, for real. Up next, Edgar Wright's second film of 2021, we have Last Night in Soho, a stylish horror movie that harkens back to horror movies of the 1960s that I admittedly have never seen. Influences among this include apparently Roman Polanski's Repulsion and other films such as Don't Look Now. I haven't seen any of them. I'm not a student of those the way that Wright is in terms of these genre horror exploitation films. But for what it's worth, I thought everything he did in this was really damn compelling. I'm not gonna lie, I thought this movie looked great. I thought some of the stuff they did where we have the modern day Ellie, played by Thomasin McKenzie, embodying through dreams the past of Sandy, played by Anya Taylor-Joy. The way that they kind of have those two characters bounce back and forth, and sometimes mirror shots, but sometimes full body shots, some really clever camera tricks. I thought what it ultimately gets down to in terms of the dangers of romanticizing nostalgia and not realizing that the things we love from the past were actually built on systems of violence and exploitation. He's not the first filmmaker to do this, and this maybe isn't even the most clever use of that kind of messaging, and yet it's still very, very good in my opinion. I was on board with this the whole time. I thought that Thomasin McKenzie's Ellie was so well drawn as a character that I was really fearful for her and all the high stakes situations that she was in, and the ultimate kind of final reveal, what we find out about Sandy and her past, was super interesting. I dug it a lot. I know some people kind of think this is a bit overhyped or overrated, and I don't know. I guess maybe it's my ignorance to this part of filmmaking history that Edgar Wright is clearly so in love with, and he's paying tribute to in this. So call it maybe my ignorance, but I thought what Last Night in Soho did was pretty dang special. I can only hope its reputation improves in later years. Maybe that's unfounded, but that's just my take on it. All right. Up next, we've got one of my top 5 favorite movies of the year. We have Last Duel, The Last Duel, not A Last Duel. This is one of 2 Ridley Scott movies from this year, and this is a hell of a historical drama. It is based off of a 2003 novel that detailed the final legally recognized trial by combat in the Kingdom of France in the 1300s, and it's from a script by Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, and Nicole Holofencer, and it's just incredible. This is like a fascinating kind of like almost like Rashomon perspective hopping story about an accusation of rape, and you see the perspective of the husband of the woman who was victimized, you see the perspective of her rapist, and you see her perspective, and the movie bounces through all 3 narratives to show you how, you know, different individuals tied to different events see different things, and then it all culminates in the titular Last Duel, which is one of, like, in Ridley Scott's entire history of incredible action set pieces, I was on the edge of my seat because I didn't know the actual historical outcome of this duel, and I remember my fiance and I being like, oh my god, who's gonna win? It's so good. This is such great filmmaking. And, you know, the story of this movie is that, oh, it's one of the big bombs of the year. It lost so much money. I don't quite really know why this bombed, besides I would just assume pandemic-era paranoia about getting back in theaters. I don't know if it wasn't marketed well enough, but, like, Jodie Comer, my like, I'll just say it, Jodie Comer, my ultimate best supporting actress, any category of 2021, is phenomenal in this. And I've talked several times on this about, oh, you know, films that we're not going to get anymore, you know, types of dramas that studios aren't going to take risks on. This might be one of the key ones. The only thing that gives me any kind of, like, hope is that when I tried to buy this on 4K when it came out, it was completely sold out on a couple online retailers, including Amazon. So I can only hope that this is going to get a second life on home media, and then people are going to kind of give it the respect it deserves and the, you know, the viewings it deserves, because Last Duel, man, it's very good. All right, moving on to Walt Disney Animation's Encanto. So this is a movie I'm gonna admit I was very underwhelmed by, to the dismay of several of my friends who saw it with me. My one friend, she will constantly, you know, rub in my face, oh, Encanto, the #1 movie of 2021, and I'm like, it's not the #1 movie, but it is very good. But she ribs me anyway. Look, this is a delightful little musical. A very good film writer over at Collider, Douglas Lehman, wrote a fantastic piece about how the main character of this movie, Maribel, actually kind of almost perfectly embodies the experience of neurodivergent individuals within families where everyone else is quote-unquote normal. And, you know, that's how the general plot of this movie goes. Maribel Madrigal is the only member of this family who doesn't have the kind of magical gifts that they're embodied with. Her sisters, one's super strong, one is like perfect and can, like, you know, make flowers appear and stuff like that, but she's the only normal one, and it's a source of, like, strife for her, but it ends up bringing about this conflict within the family and the community they've created. And, you know, it is a very strong story in that regard. The family dynamics work well enough. The big thing for me, I'm just going to admit it, like, you know, there was a lot of hype writing into this, that this was, you know, an original movie musical from Lin-Manuel Miranda. He wrote and, you know, produced and sings one of the songs, but all of the songs he was directly involved in. And, you know, it's my opinion, as in the opinion of many, that he should have just won an Oscar for the fantastic work he did on Moana. It's kind of sad that the worst song from La La Land beat so many great songs from Moana, but that's a retrospective rant. Anyway, in this, I don't know. I felt very underwhelmed by the songs in this movie. And, you know, when we're doing a Disney musical, I'd like them to be a little bit more clever and have more, you know, kind of meaningful lyrical wordplay and stuff like that. So that's where it falls short, in my opinion. But it's in no way a bad movie, and I've come to see what it means to a lot of viewers. So I'm gonna bump this up a little bit further than it even was in my initial Letterboxd list. I'm gonna put this, it's a high B tier film, and just that all the pieces don't fully work for me, but I appreciate what it means to other people, and I think it deserves recommendation and to be viewed on those regards, 100%. Another musical, I think it's the last musical. No, it's the second to last musical on this list. We have Tick, Tick, Boom. Hey, 2 Lin-Manuels back to back. How did that happen? Yes, this is Lin-Manuel Miranda's live-action directorial debut, adapting the Jonathan Larson play, Tick, Tick, Boom, which he wrote and produced before Rent. So this is the kind of an autobiographical, fictional musical story of Jonathan Larson in the years that he was struggling to write his first musical, before Rent. And I thought this was, just a really compelling and well-made debut, and it's anchored fully by Andrew Garfield's performance. Before I saw Power of the Dog, Andrew was my frontrunner for Best Actor. I think this is some of the most terrific work of his career, and not just that, he sings and performs, which for me in movie musicals is just like an extra leg up, but just like the way he embodies, the anxiety and the sense of like hopelessness that Jonathan Larson through this musical says he felt, and then as he kind of gets some fresher perspective on the world that the people that he loves are living in, and the way he kind of just like decides to shape up and is like, I gotta do better because I could be using my gifts for the benefit of others. It's so remarkable, and so many of the ballads that he pushes through in this are just incredible. And Lin does some incredibly well filmed sequences in this, especially a kind of fantasy musical sequence set at the diner that Jonathan works at, where a lot of kind of iconic Broadway legends appear in the film as extras, but extras participating in the music. Very, very good. Just a hell of a lot to like in this movie. It's on Netflix right now. I would say this is something that's definitely worth checking out. And it's gonna go in my A tier, and I gotta move some stuff around because this is upper A tier for me. Let me see here. We've got a little short film continuation of the events of Luca. We have Ciao Alberto, and this is cute, but ultimately kind of just very slight. When I talked about how Gunpowder Milkshake, kind of ran through material that could have been saved for the sequel, this entire thing, Ciao Alberto, this could have been like the opening 5 minutes of Luca 2, if they ever made it or something, And maybe they made the short film because they didn't know if Luca was going to continue in any capacity, but it's a nice little focus on Alberto. Now after the events of the movie, he's living in the fishing village, and he's an apprentice fisherman, and his life without his best friend, and how he's trying to just be his best self. And it's very cute, it's very thoughtful. It's just ultimately kind of not entirely much of anything. If you like Luca, it's more Luca, and it's great in that regard, but like as a standalone short film, it's also just kind of like, all right, that was fine. Up next, we have 8-Bit Christmas. This is a holiday comedy that released on HBO Max Thanksgiving weekend. So let me be honest, when I saw the advertising and kind of concept of this movie, it's like a Christmas story, but more for the modern day. It's about a father reflecting on the Christmas where all he wanted in the world was a Nintendo Entertainment System, and what he was going to do to get that. And so you go into it thinking like that, and the trailer is kind of like focused on some like raunchy comedic elements and, jokes about people being willing to like beat people up in malls to get the toy and stuff like that. But to be honest, it is a lot more than that. And I don't know if maybe people slept on this movie because of how it was marketed, but it's something really, heartwarming and special. It's more than what it seems to be, and I appreciated it in that regard. I think the only real the big knock I'm going to get about this is that as a comedy, it's a comedy of very soft laughs. Like, the jokes in this revolve around 2 punchlines. It's either, oh man, people in the 80s didn't know how wild the future would get, and you get people like in the 1980s flashbacks, like you have a teacher like, make sure you practice your cursive, kids, because cursive will be very important when you grow up. Or, you get people saying like, oh, like, this won't matter in 20 years. And so it's like, you as a modern day viewer, like, they didn't know. Or the other end of the soft laughs are in the present day, where Neil Patrick Harris's daughter is like, who's Huey Lewis? Or a Nintendo? Is that like an app on my phone? And it's like, come on. It's one of those things where it's like, kids don't know about the past. The movie itself is a lot more than just that. In the end, ends up being a pretty, heart-tugging family drama that I could see this potentially entering the Christmas canon. I feel like it's been a while since there have been any worthy candidates to become very good new Christmas films. So this one's decent enough in that regard. So high C tier for 8-Bit Christmas. We've got A House of Gucci, the second Ridley Scott movie of 2021, a soap opera biopic about the drama within the Gucci family and the murder of Maurizio Gucci, played by Adam Driver. But the reason you go see this movie is for Lady Gaga as Patrizia Gucci, her former surname Reggiani, and just the powerhouse performance she gives as, the woman who is entranced into marrying into this family and then wants to, reshape Gucci into the fashion empire it could be, while her husband kind of slowly comes into more of his own agency. He starts kind of wanting nothing to do with the Gucci legacy, but then as the film goes on and his marriage to Patrizia gets more and more complicated, he decides he wants to take charge. And all of this is kind of like, positioned against scenes of Al Pacino as Aldo Gucci and his son Paolo Gucci, played by Jared Leto, who I don't know what he thinks or thought he was doing, but it's one of, I can't decide if it's one of the best performances of the year, but it's one of the performances of the year. Jared Leto as Paolo Gucci, packed in so much makeup and whimpering around and just giving out the most ludicrous Italian accent of any of the actors in this, pretending to be Italian. You got Jared Leto, Maurizio, I'm a Gucci, I'm gonna win. Like, he's fascinating to watch in this. I couldn't believe it at times. My big dig against this movie, I think it's too long. I was really running out of fumes on it by the end, but it is never not entertaining. So if you're in for some big soapy drama with hot actors scheming against each other and banging each other while, acting legends ham it up and deliver just big bodacious performances, Gucci's there for you. Gucci will get you there. All right, up next we got Licorice Pizza, the Paul Thomas Anderson movie that everybody has a take on. So this is, essentially this is Paul Thomas Anderson's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It's a hangout movie with fictional characters interacting with people and moments from the time period that the directors grew up in. And in this, we have Elena and Gary, played by Elena Heim, and Philip Seymour Hoffman's son, Cooper Hoffman, playing a mismatched friendship. I'm going to just say that before we talk about it. A mismatched friendship during the 70s, during the fuel shortage crisis, and a couple other notable events. And so, this movie's blowing up online. There's all these conversations. The first and foremost thing being the fact that the main characters paired off. Alana Haim's character is established to be 25 years old, but she may be lying about her age. And she forms this friendship with, in the film, 15-year-old Gary Valentine. And a lot of people are booing the age mismatch. And the age mismatch is a problem, but it's something the movie acknowledges as not good. And it's something that, I get a little, I'm like, guys, the movie's not, saying, isn't this a great, illegal relationship? Because first and foremost, it's never there. It starts as a friendship based on Alana kind of seeing the ambition in Cooper's Gary, and Gary being this magnetic, charismatic kind of hustler, and she kind of helps him with some of his get-rich-quick schemes. He tries selling his own water beds because he thinks that's what's going to be the big thing, and he wants to make money. And then and so she's like, well, you need help opening a building, I'll help you, because I see you as somebody visionary. But the thing is, he keeps trying to pursue her romantically, and she consistently shoots him down. That's a key thing. People are trying to say this is like a movie built on a predatory thing, but like, you know, she's always putting her foot down and saying no, and Gary's the one pushing for it, and she says no. Now, there are two instances in the movie where she slightly starts to like give in to him, the second being the finale, but people just jumping immediately down that plot point's throat are missing Alana's entire character. You know, Alana is an insecure, wayward young woman who doesn't have any direction or hopes for herself, and she's constantly in the orbit of these men, both young and old, who are like using her. Like, Gary's using her because he's trying to use her romantically, but he's also using her to like fund his businesses and be almost like a surrogate mom to him. Gary's relationship to her is very creepy and borderline, like, you know, he's borderline the antagonist of the movie. But then, you know, she falls into relationships with actual like historical actors, or she gets involved with a fictional character played by Benny Safdie. Oh no, Benny Safdie is playing a real person who is running for mayor, but she falls in love with him, and that relationship falls apart because of miscommunications and him like using her in different ways. But the point is that like Alana is always trying to like get out of the hole that she sees herself in, you know, hanging out with high school students. Like she knows it's gross and pathetic, but then when she looks to older men, she gets like shot down, and then she, like, you know, in fits of insecurity goes back to Gary, and Gary's like, well, that's what I want, so come here. And when the film ends on them, spoiler for Licorice Pizza, sorry, you know, skip ahead a bit, but the film ends with them, you know, finally pairing off, and I don't think it's in any way sold as a good thing. I think it's sold as like, this is horrible for both of them. So that's just my perspective on the movie and the whole controversy it's generated. The other controversy that it's rightly generated, I just want to say, is we have, what's his name? John Michael Higgins? Yeah, John Michael Higgins from Pitch Perfect and a number of other movies. You know, he's a long-standing character actor. He plays a restaurant owner who has a series of Japanese wives that he talks to in ugly, racist, caricatured accents, while then also being like, oh, I don't know, I don't actually understand their language. Like, he's an ugly character that ultimately could have been cut from the film. Like, he doesn't serve any real narrative purpose. The most generous read I could give is that he's there to just kind of like continue the film's commentary on like how, you know, men had a lot of ugly privilege and power in that era, but none of his scenes directly, you know, impact or relate to Alana, so therefore like the commentary just feels a little bit unnecessary, because all the kind of ugliness that Alana encounters is more meaningful because it's through her. And in this, it's just like, hey, let's have John Michael Higgins just do, you know, a really bad Japanese accent. You know, like when I was in the theater watching this, like I was like, this is dumb, but I heard people around kind of be like, ooh, you know, like it's pointless. So with all that addressed, this is an incredibly well-made, borderline just slice of life movie. It's an interesting commentary on the characters that inhabit the film. Alana, you know, Alana Haim being the best thing about it, her performance incredible, one of the best actresses of the year. But I didn't take a lot from it. It felt just kind of like, you know, with Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, his nostalgic hangout movie, it also kind of had this objective of being, you know, like Quentin's rewriting history for fan fiction, you know, what he did with Inglourious Basterds. So that kind of ultimately had a point. And in this, it's kind of just like, hey, here are two people who are caught up in an era, and ultimately one of them suffers a lot and one of them gains a lot, and then it's over. So I don't know. Despite all those gripes, you know, Paul Thomas Anderson makes movies like very few people do. So I'm going to put it up high B tier. I don't know. You kind of got to iron out a lot of those kinks and everything. So that's my take on Licorice Pizza. All right, up next we have my second favorite film of the year, Steven Spielberg's West Side Story. Holy crap, it's one of those things where like, how was it ever in doubt? But then also simultaneously, why did we ever think to doubt it? You give one of the most acclaimed movie musicals of all time to one of our greatest living filmmakers, if not the greatest living filmmaker, and he does incredible work with it. Wow, what a surprise. But no, it's a legitimate surprise. Just to admit, I only saw the original West Side Story a week before I saw this. But I saw it and I was like, damn, this is like perfect. The original is just kind of like perfect outside of its, you know, terrible casting and brown facing. It can rise above it. And this, it manages to improve on it in every way while also kind of leaving the original as its own distinct, fantastic object. This is perfectly cast, perfectly staged. The set design, the cinematography, the reorganization of all of the musical themes, just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And then it all comes together to tell like the same well-worn but good story that we have. And all right, look, Ansel Elgort is the sore spot in this movie because of all the performers who are singing and acting. I would say he's the least good singer, but he can sing decently. But, you know, his real life shenanigans, you know, the allegations that have been made against him with receipts are pretty damning. And the fact that, you know, he's in a movie kind of pursuing an actress who is much younger than him, or a character much younger than him, and an actress, Rachel Zegler, much younger than him, it adds an air of like, ooh, to this, you know. It is what it is, and it's not entirely great, but he's not even bad enough to overpower everything else that this movie does so freaking well. There are shots in this movie that I'm still thinking of. I listened to the performances of this on the soundtrack on Spotify. Like, there are musical numbers in this where I'm like, well, the original's version of America is so freaking good. How can you top it? Oh, this movie destroyed it. It's fantastic. It's delightful. It's a real crowd pleaser. And, you know, like The Last Duel, it's a movie that, like, people just didn't go near, and it's like, well, your loss is all I can say, is your loss for missing out on something so spectacular. I can only imagine this is going to have a much more powerful, much longer shelf life down the road. But West Side Story, yeah, S tier. All right, so up next we have Don't Look Up. Man, I really miss Talladega Nights, Adam McKay. I really miss Step Brothers, Adam McKay. You know, like, I saw The Big Short in theaters, and it's one of those movies where, like, I kind of appreciate the stylistic ambition of it, but it's ultimately so condescending of a movie that at the end I kind of just didn't like any of it. I was like, well, okay, you instructed me on how the mortgage crisis happened, but also you did it in such like a look how clever I am way that I was just kind of like, all right, dude, like, chill. And I didn't see Vice, but I heard a lot of the same kind of crap about Vice, that it's such a smug comedy, you know, about Dick Cheney, who's such an easy supervillain that, like, I don't think you have to be that smug about it. And then Don't Look Up, it's the same degree of, you know, this is like a Saturday Night Live sketch stretched to 2 hours. This is a movie that reinforces the idea that comedies should not go over 100 minutes unless they really have a strong case for it, and this one does not. Now, it's a very big supporting cast who, you know, I can imagine were attracted to Adam McKay's Oscar pedigree, and there's a lot of really interesting and good performances in this. I think Cate Blanchett does a fantastic job being this kind of just like fame and power obsessed news anchor. You've got Jonah Hill as like the smarmy son of the president, who's the chief of staff just because of the connection to the president, and he's, you know, but he thinks he's hot shit. You got Leo and J-Law selling like anxiety and anger and hopelessness really well while trying to keep it together. There's an entire subplot with like Mark Rylance as a Steve Jobs plus Mark Zuckerberg tech guru that, like, I think just takes what this movie's metaphors are just into too far of a direction. Like, I don't know, like, the basic gist of the message is there. You know, distrust in experts, distrust and miscommunication from higher powers down to the common person creates these systems wherein we're not going to survive the most significant disasters of our time, first and foremost being climate change. But, you know, like, Adam McKay admitted, he said, like, he wrote this before the pandemic, and they went into pre-production when the pandemic started, and he said he was seeing things in the news where he was like, this is crazier than what I wrote in my script. And he had to kind of like dial up scenarios in this movie to make them 20% wilder because he couldn't believe what he was seeing in real life. And in the end, he makes a movie that's like is like slightly relatable, but also just kind of, it feels antiquated. Like, you know, nothing about this movie's message about how, like, if we don't get on the same page, we're doomed. It's like, man, we already know. So I don't know. It's not funny enough as a comedy, and it's not meaningful enough as social commentary to be anything really. So this is a D. This is a D for me. No thanks. Up next, we've got the biggest movie of the year, the biggest movie since the pandemic era of movie-going started. We have Spider-Man, The Spider-Mans. No Way Home. Tom Holland's third outing as the MCU's Peter Parker in a big smorgasbord. Look, if you're online watching this, you probably already know. It's a big universe-smashing smorgasbord where we get the villains and the heroes from Spider-Man movies past. And this is a lot of fun. I saw this in theaters. It is a great, bombastic theater-going experience in like the same way that Endgame was, where it's something that's fantastic to be seen with other film lovers, other moviegoers in a crowded room together so you can have that communal experience. This is a big firework-studded celebration of the cinematic history of Spider-Man to date. That said, the movie doesn't stand up to any degree of scrutiny. It's good, but it's also one of those things that completely fall apart when you think of how any of its mechanics are justified, how any of the rules it lays out to, bring in people from different universes. But you know what? Like, for a lot of people, that's fine. And in the moment, it was fine for me. It's a big, shamelessly fun action adventure movie. And Spider-Man's a great character, Peter Parker's a great character, so it's fun to live in this universe and see alternate perspectives on it and have a lot of, like, fan theories or kind of, like, fan observations justified with, like, you shoot webs out of your hands? That's weird, because we make ours, Also, let's just call this what it is. This is the Andrew Garfield redemption moment of 2021, where, when I saw Spider-Man, The Amazing Spider-Man, the 2012 movie, I was like, well, this didn't fully work, but this cast is game. If you give them better material, I think they could go far. And then The Amazing Spider-Man 2 happened, and it was like, all right, kill it with fire. But here you get Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker Spider-Man combo in a movie that's competently written and charming and gives him a lot to do. And wow, what a surprise. He's great. There's a big push right now to get him to be allowed to, kind of come back and finish his Spider-Man story in his own terms, because Tobey got his 3 and Tom Holland now has got his 3. And I would not complain at all if Garfield got that. I'm not going to lie. I love the way that it ends, and it sets us up for future Spider-Man adventures where Tom Holland's Peter is finally, an underdog, the way I personally think Peter Parker is supposed to be. He's more interesting when he's an underdog, not when he has the Avengers to give him technology and back him up and help him out of situations. So I can only hope that that's where this movie continues to go with things. So if Holland ever does come back. So we're going to call this an A. And we're going to put it kind of slightly down towards the bottom of the A tier. And finally, the last movie on Letterboxd's little chronological tour of the last year, we have The Matrix Resurrections, which is the big fan base dividing movie of the moment. And look, I enjoyed it. I don't think this is perfect, but I think this is a big, ambitious sequel that I admire that it got made. You know what I mean? Like, I love that Lana Wachowski got to come back and tell the story of these characters that she and her sister created so many years ago and take them in new and exciting directions. And, I think this movie has some interesting things to say. It taps into, for me, what it reminded me of was Metal Gear Solid 2's kind of commentary on digital evolution and echo chambers and social media and all that. I think it has some meaningful things to say about how we get trapped in cycles or on treadmills that sometimes we can really be damaged by these systems that are controlling us. There's a sequence in here of Keanu Reeves's Thomas Anderson, stuck in a constant cycle of going to work and being unsatisfied, coming home and working out or eating or getting coffee because that's what you do, going to bed, waking up and doing it all again, and none of it stimulates him. Big me energy in the pandemic, it hit me so freaking hard. That entire, it's like the White Rabbit montage because it's set to that song and it's so good. The action's a little underwhelming in this. It kind of makes me think that Lily Wachowski was maybe the sister with more of an eye towards action set pieces. Lana doesn't direct it that well, but there's one or two action moments in this work really well. But, Keanu and Carrie-Anne Moss coming back and flexing, the chemistry that they've always had, but letting this get focused on more of like a story about their relationship, I thought was really well. It works a lot more with kind of the implied lore of the Matrix as a series and like more stuff we saw in the Animatrix from 2003. One of the bigger disappointments for me is just that, like, I've always wanted the Matrix movies to get more into some of the higher concepts outside of the Trinity Neo Morpheus story. Like, this world seems so much deeper, and this movie taps into some of it. There's a robot civil war, there's human robot integration, and it's like, we explain that really quickly, and it's like, nah, give me a short film about that, or give me a feature film about that. They're really intriguing concepts. I liked it. I very much enjoyed it, and I think it's a good conversation starter of a movie, and I'm glad it exists for what it is. I'm glad that Lana got to kind of go back and, tell this story of characters that mean a lot to her on her own terms, and so this I'm going to put at my highest B for the year. It's still on HBO Max at the moment, so you can still catch it, and I'd recommend that you do so. Don't look at it expecting that you're going to get the same Matrix you might have grown up with. Just try to kind of take it on its own merits. It's not a perfect movie, but I think it does some interesting things. Yeah, this is about it. It very much skewers towards I liked this more than I hated this. And, maybe that's a little bit of just kind of like my movie palette. I kind of just judge by marketing. If I don't think I'm going to like something, I kind of stay away from it. But, there's good, there's bad, and there's meh, and that's my kind of scope of it for this year. Thank you for tuning into this. I hope you enjoyed it. If you've got any movies on this that you agree with, that you disagree with, tell me in the comments. I'm always willing to keep a good discourse going. In terms of what's going on for the rest of this year, I don't know. I made promises on last year's video that I didn't keep, so maybe I should just keep my mouth shut. Or maybe I should continue to be held publicly accountable and see where things go. I don't know. I have another Mise en Game project that I want to develop based around Ghost of Tsushima, so I'm probably going to spend the beginning of the year working on that. And in terms of filmmaking stuff, I mean, I don't know. Our subscriber base is really unique in that I don't know which of you come here for the movie talk or the filmmaking or for the video game, cutscene stuff. Whatever you come here for, thank you. I appreciate everyone who subscribed, especially during our kind of dead period that we've had a lot recently. It means a lot to me to see people who are at least interested in seeing what we have done and where we could go with this. So for right now, all I'm going to say is I'm hoping I get into the headspace I need to be to get back to being creative. And if you watch any of this at all because you're interested in what we make here at Sycamore Street Studios, I hope to give you something worthy of your time. So until then, here's to a Happy New Year. I hope you all stay happy and healthy. And until next time, catch you later.